Alright guys, welcome back. If you built the calculator on your own, great job. If you didn't yet, we're going to do a great job right now. So, I'm back in my projects directory in Terminal, and I'm going to run create react app, and I'm going to call this calc. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to do all the heavy lifting of installing React and the React dependencies. Now, in the meantime, let's discuss a few of the concepts. Basically, we're going to need a grid with buttons. Ideally, it will be, well, we'll make it flex a little bit. I'm not sure how. From a design standpoint, we're not going to be using any libraries like Bootstrap. You can if you would like to, but we will cover how to integrate Bootstrap using React Strap actually in the next video. Or one of the next videos, I'm not sure exactly. So let's just give it a few minutes to get everything set up for us. And in fact, I'll probably pause the video and come back when it's done. Alright guys, that actually didn't take too long. So hopefully by this point you guys have followed along and we've now got a project called calc ready to get going. So I'm going to cd into that directory, and I actually don't need terminal anymore. We are going to create add workspace folder, and so let me get project calc. There we go, and I'm going to add this, close the welcome screen, and then let's get started. So, if we're discussing a calculator, one of the first things we'll need, I guess, would be, well, the buttons. But let's get rid of this. Let's use the existing app container here. We're going to create an input field, which will house the actual current kind of mathematical equation, I guess. So let's go ahead and make an input field, and the class name is going to be result. There's going to be no placeholder type. Let's go ahead and write text, and then value, let's say, is going to be this state current. Alright, so now let's go instantiate the state. So constructor, we're going to pass in the props, and now we're always going to instantiate the parent class, so run super props. I'm going to pass in props to the super method, and then we're going to say this dot state equals current. It's going to be basically nothing in there, and then previous is going to be an array, and we will cover that later. Yeah, alright. So let's go ahead and save this, and then open a terminal, and I'm going to run npm start. Now it's going to load up our application here. And we'll really only need a view like this, right? So we could actually kind of tile it in a way. Yeah, that should be enough. Alright, so we got some room on the left, some room on the right, and we're good to go. Alright, so we've got our input field, and right now it does nothing. And that's because we need the grid of buttons, and those are going to need to be responsive, so we're going to need to add some CSS to it. Before that, in the source directory, I'm going to add a folder, and I'm going to call it components. And then in the source directory, I'm going to add another folder, and I'm going to call it CSS. And then in components, let's go ahead and create a new file, and it's going to be called button.js. So we're going to create the new React component. As always, you need to import React, and then in these curly braces, component from, and then all lowercase, React. So we're importing React, and I just realized that this has zoomed out again. Let's zoom that in a bit. There we go. I hope this is big enough. Okay, alright. So let's drop down a few lines. And class button extends component. So we're always, when we write a React component, we're always going to extend React's component class. Now the first thing we need is a render method, and then we need to return some HTML, and the HTML that we return is going to be a div with a button inside of the div. So we're going to need some props so that each time we instantiate a button, the button knows what it is and what it should do. So let's go ahead and add button class calc button, just because we are going to be styling these. And then for right now, let's just print the number 1 there. And then we also need to export default button. And now we're ready to use this and start creating our grid of buttons in app. But we need to import button. So we're going to import button from. In the current directory, we're going to look for a components directory and then button. We're going to save this, and then down here we're going to start creating rows, probably with a clear fix after it. And well, we can just space things. If we're thinking about a calculator, I'm going to open up calculator here. So it's not going to be fully featured, but it is going to be something like this. So we can look at how it reacts as it gets big and small. And we're going to do something similar, except we're just going to probably keep it like this view. So 4 across, we're going to have this row all the way to this row. So we're going to need a 4 by 5 grid. So how we're going to do this is we're going to create a variable, a constant variable called buttons, and it's going to be an array because we're going to map through these buttons, which we haven't done before. So you will get to learn how to do that. So what we're going to need to do is objects, and we're going to have a symbol property. So let's say C. We're going to have probably a column width. Yeah, we'll need to create some grid structure here, and Bootstrap would help a lot. Yeah, but instead of going and integrating Bootstrap itself, we're just going to have to do this ourselves. So call width, calls, let's say, it's going to be 1, and then action. All right. So we're going to need to define some actions or some functions that each button will call. that will update it accordingly. Let's say action is going to be this, reset. All right, so let's create a reset function. And it's going to do this, set state result equals, the result is going to be 0. And actually, let's make that a string and set the default as well. So I'm going to save, it's going to refresh with 0 in there. Good stuff. And we have our first button, which we haven't used at all yet. We will get to that. And let's think about the layout basically. So, I mean we're not going to need all these buttons. That can be, like, this isn't the usual layout for a calculator. I'm going to check on my phone and see what the calculator there looks like. Oh, it's very similar. Okay. Divide, multiply, minus, plus, and okay. So we're going to basically have a large C button here, which is going to reset it. So the columns are actually going to be 3. And then we're going to have a divide button. So, symbol is going to be, we don't have a divide button, so we'll have to use a slash. Calls is going to be 1, and action is going to be this. Add to current. Yes, all right. So we're going to need a new method called add to current. And what this method will do is it's going to take in a parameter called new. Or we can't do that. I like short variable names, but some things just will not work. So add to current, and we'll say symbol. And then going to this set state, and we're going to say this state current, rather, no. We need to say current is going to be equal to this state current plus symbol. So essentially what we're doing here is we're just going to add the symbol, and most of the methods that we, or most of the buttons here that we work with are going to use that function. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to say 7, and say 8, paste again, 9, say times, or an X, and that's going to be on the right hand side. So now we're going to start the next row down, 4, 5, 6 minus 4, 5, 6, and then minus. Then next to last row, we're going to have 1, 2, 3 plus. So 1, oops, I zoomed way down there. So 1, 2, 3, and then a plus symbol. And then another row, and in this row we're going to have 0, the columns is going to be equal to 2, and then we're going to have period, just a regular dot, and then the equals symbol. Okay, so we have columns ranging from 1, 2 to 3. We can convert those to percentages, which we are going to do, but for right now, we need to actually map them out. We've got all these created, and we're not using them yet in the application. And I just realized that so far we're at about 15 minutes in this video, so it's probably going to be cut into 2 parts. So I'll have to find a good spot to cut that, but for right now, we're going to map out these. We're going to learn how to map components. So this is an ES6 arrow function. So where we're going to be using a function or JavaScript code within the HTML, we need to open curly braces. And the variable we've got defined is buttons. So we're going to map through that. And how you map through an array is you type the array name dot map. And this is a method. So you're going to open up parentheses and you're going to open up another set. So rather than typing function and then parentheses and then curly braces, with ES6, imagine that function is written right here and just put your parameters in here. So the buttons are going to map through, and each individual button is going to be callable within this scope as btn, and then we're also going to pass the index number, and I will tell you guys why in just a moment. So right now we're going to use an arrow to move over into the scope of this mapping function. And what we're going to do is we are going to return button, and we are going to say symbol is going to be btn.symbol. So for instance, this row right here, this column, C divide 789, that's going to be passed in as props.symbol. Calls is going to be equal to button.calls, and then action. So here's a tricky part. I'm just going to leave that for a second. I'm going to close the button component. So what we need to do is we need to receive a symbol to then pass to add to current. So what we're going to do is open up parenthesis, and we're going to say symbol, and then we're going to use an arrow to call button.action. Save. There we go. Oh man, something's messed up. And do you know what it is? We haven't done anything within the button component itself. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it right now. I'm going to add all this code to a GitHub repository, and I will post it in the link for this video or in the discussion so that you guys can access the finished version of the code.